Welcome to the 2020 Speech and Debate Showcase. Tonight you will see all the amazing things we do in our program. Throughout the night, you will see a mixture of speech events and debate events. We will begin our showcase with the individual speech events. These competitive categories range from student-written orations to humorous interpretation of literature, where one student portrays multiple characters, dramatic interpretation of literature, and a partnered performance called duo interpretation, which can be dramatic or humorous in nature. These speech events will be scattered throughout the evening between our debate showcases. We hope you enjoy what we have prepared for you, and if you are interested in joining our program, please reach out to any of the speech students or send an email to Mr. Ryan Levesque at ryan.levesque@ahschool.com. Enjoy the showcase!
This is my mom. She claims that she's not a regular mom. She's a cool mom. And quite frankly, Carol. Yikes. Whether it's music, movies, or the Kardashians, she's trying to keep up. Keyword, trying. She won't stop hitting the whoa and constantly sends me bitmojis of herself, updating me about her day. I'll usually leave her on read. But most recently, my mother took it too far when she started dabbling with the forbidden art of memes. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. She shares them with her friends on Facebook and they get like 6 likes. And she's proud of that. But now I'm the laughingstock of her virtual wine club. My mama's memeing may be embarrassing, but I can't blame her for doing what all the cool kids are doing these days. She gets it. Conversations have evolved from interpersonal to internet, and in 2020, memes are the new mode of communication. As social psychologist at Stanford University, Dr. Rosanna Guadagno writes, the hyperpopularity of memes indicate that there are much deeper psychosocial mechanisms underpinning our relationship with this seemingly benign media form. Funny? Yes. But these photos, videos, and captions aren't a silly, separate entity. They unleash truths about who we are as a society. I hate to say it, but maybe my mom was right. It is imperative we keep up with the trend of memes. So, today, let's put on our cool mom jeans. And first, learn about the structure and spread of memes. Next, we'll update our status to see how memes are used today, before finally reaching Kris Jenner level by understanding the cultural impact of memes. Because, as the Pew Research Center reports, over 2/3 of Americans get their news from social media, where anyone can post anything they want, and often in the form of memes. I tried explaining to Carol that one cannot simply understand memes until one learns their structure, how and why they spread. Her response was, okay, boomer. I don't think she knows what that means. To break down modern memes, let's look at what the internet believes to be the very first in history. This, from the University of Iowa satirical magazine, The Judge, published in 1921. It, 1, displays an image. 2, contains text. And to fully get it, we need 3, cultural context. Apparently, flash photography had just been popularized at the time, and this printed figure comments on the expectation versus reality of a printed photograph. Hilarious. But it wasn't until 1976 when biologist Richard Dawkins wrote his book, The Selfish Gene, that the word meme was coined. Dawkins compares genetics to self-replicating social communication, or memetics. Much in the way our parents pass down eye color, memes combine and replicate, whereas some aspects are dominant and some are recessive. When any social communication is repeated, then altered, whether it be images, videos, catchphrases, even dance moves, they are considered memes. But wait, we all know how humans reproduce. Storks. But is there a meme stork? No, that's ridiculous. Dana Boyd, principal researcher at Microsoft, suggests that the memes boom happened because of internet expansion. Memes need three things: searchability, replicability, and scalability. Well, we all have Google at our fingertips. Searchability. There are several meme generators just a click away. Replicability. And social media platforms such as Instagram and Facebook provide the largest scale possible. Speaking of Facebook, if I had $1 for the amount of times Carol sent me a Facebook meme about Trump, I'd have $1 because I blocked her and threw my phone in a river. But back in her day, they didn't have Facebook. So how did they make fun of politicians? Newspapers? Oh, right! Newspapers! The ancient political cartoon has long satirized current events, poking at those with power. But today, we don't need a talented artist nor a newspaper subscription to keep up, because political memes are everywhere. The replicability of satire has made politics accessible to young people like never before. And those running for office have caught on. Former 2020 presidential candidate Andrew Yang embraced the idea of becoming a meme because, as his campaign manager Zach Rauman puts it, being a memeable person allows a candidate to stand out in a crowded field. When Yang suggested giving $1,000 a month to every American, he knew that memes would be created. Known as the internet candidate, Yang went from being virtually unknown to last year, having his gang go from raising $6.5 million in the third quarter to $16.5 million in the fourth quarter. And while politicians use the art of the meme to raise money, activists are using memes to raise awareness, and marginalized communities find themselves represented in popular culture. For example, the Human Rights Campaign, the largest LGBTQ advocacy group in the United States, designed the red equal sign. In March of 2013, over 10 million Facebook and Twitter users personalized and altered the logo, making it not just a symbol, but a meme in support of same-sex marriage. Professor Stephanie V. of the University of Central Florida says, virtual support can make a difference. The shifting idea of what marriage represents with respect to the LGBTQ population is a classic example of how memes shape thinking and action, therefore providing a basis for social change and movements. So it's clear that memes help us find a sense of belonging. But, unfortunately, today's political landscape breeds memes to communicate messages that aren't so positive. The Washington Post tells a story of Joanna Schroeder, a white single mother of 2. Her boys were about 11 and 14 when they began asking questions about things like transgender rights and cultural appropriation. But she sensed something was off about how they asked. Racist, sexist, and homophobic memes had inundated her kids' social media accounts, indoctrinating them into the world of alt-right extremism and white supremacy. These extremists use jokes and memes to normalize bigotry while maintaining plausible deniability. The alt-right and white supremacist organizations all understand the influence of memes, who they target, and how they can be used to recruit and advance their hateful agendas. But we don't have to be evil to misuse memes. Many of us are guilty of using memes to perpetuate our culture's most problematic tropes, specifically with race. The Guardian explains that the online popularity of internet users utilizing images of Black people for reaction GIFs is a meme critique coined as digital blackface. Author Monica Torres explains that these images portray Black women as sassy and extravagant, allowing non-Black users to reaffirm stereotypes about Black people. You may remember the iconic interview of Kimberly Sweet Brown Wilkins And her catchphrase? Ain't nobody got time for that. You may have forgotten that Sweet Brown was a survivor of a fire. The memification of trauma takes stories like Wilkins and turns them into a joke. It's easy for us to click a mouse or press enter when we forget that behind every meme is a story. And even though memes are funny, and certainly do meme well, that's not all they are. And now we're more aware of that. Today we've discussed the history, uses, and impacts of memes. So whether or not your mom is like mine, and if she is, I'm sorry, the Carols of the world may have been onto something. Her devotion to staying up to date is inspiring. So ask yourselves, what do you meme?
Elotes, elotes a $1. Elotes. Ándele, buy a corn. A diet. Well, what diet? For what? Your old man will, oh, he's fat. Eat one, you'll feel much better. Besides, who's going to want to take her husband? He's fat. Ándele, cómpreme uno. Ay, bueno, okay. How do you want it? With mayo and everything? Okay. You know, I've been working on the corner of this street for 5 years now. I came here from Mexico and I brought my 3 daughters with me because, because my husband left me for some tiny malpinto hamas, a 20-year-old mensa. And so I came here and I started working as a maid. Until I got tired of being treated like a slave. No. Now, don't go thinking that I'm scared of hard work, because I am not. I mean, by selling corn on the street, I can provide for myself and for my daughters. And the good thing about that, well, I'm the boss. And I don't want nobody feeling sorry for me. Nobody. Why be a burden on society? Los Angeles is home to over 50,000 street vendors, many of which are undocumented immigrants. And in September of 2018, California Governor Jerry Brown signed into law Senate Bill 946, barring local authorities from handing out criminal punishments to street vendors. Thus, the success of our protagonist, La Cayetana, whose story and strength helped to change state politics. However, little can be done on the local level to stop raids from immigration and customs enforcement mandated on a national one. But perhaps by sharing inspirational stories such as this one, we can all be reminded that no matter our status, everyone here is in search of a dream. Confessions of Women from East LA by Josefina Lopez. Now, I don't like it when people say that Mexicans are lazy, because we are not. I mean, we didn't cross a river and risk our lives just so we could be touristas. No, we came here to work. And I am not scared of hard work, okay? Okay. Eso sí que no. You know what I didn't like when I first started working here? Was that I would be selling my corn and the police would pass by me and tell me that it was illegal what I was doing. And that they would have to arrest me. Oh. But since I reminded them of their mothers, they wouldn't arrest me. So I would just pack my things and I would move. And in a little while, I would come back. And every week they would do this. So I would just act like a mensa and I would say, illegal. Oh no, Mr. Officer, okay, I'll go. And he would always leave, and I would always come back. But one day, elotes a $1. Oh, hello, Mr. Officer. ¿Elotes para ti? Oh, no, okay. What? Illegal? No, Mr. Officer. No, listen, Oh, okay, I will go, Mr. Officer. Mr. Officer, and in front of everybody. No, Mr. Officer, please, no. He put handcuffs on me and he kicked me inside of his officer car. No, Mr. Officer, please, no, come back. Por favor, señor Mesías, por favor, Mr. Officer, no. My daughters, please, no. That was an interesting night. My first time in jail. I spent it with the prostitutas. Woo! And I learned a thing or two that I cannot mention in front of the children. Pero bueno, I joined the tamale vendors at the church nearby, and I met this young lady. And she told me that if I went to City Hall and I told my story, that I could convince politicians to legalize street selling. No, I told her, I can't. But my daughter, my 12-year-old chiquitica, she looked so angry when she asked me why they threw me in jail. She said, "What did you do wrong, Mommy?" I told her, "Nothing. I didn't do anything wrong." But she doubted me. And so I started asking myself, well, what is my crime? I don't understand. But I know that I have not done anything wrong, and I'm not scared of anything, not even the devil. So I went to City Hall to tell my story. We are here to tell you that we are just trying to survive. We are not taking away profits from big companies because all we make is just to get by, to feed our families. We are not on the streets robbing people or committing crimes or hurting the economy like we are blamed. And just because we are illegal aliens, as you call us, doesn't mean that we don't have a voice. But why? Why are we illegal? I don't understand. What is my crime? Trying to survive. For me, trying to feed my children, because that is a right of every human being. So today, I come here to remind you that the streets and the land and the sun belong to no one. They belong to all of us. And that is why we are here to beg you to give us the right to earn a living. Gracias. I was so nervous. But I told them what I thought they should know. And we won the right to sell. I have a dream that one day we can create a union of street vendors. Andele. I know it's almost impossible, especially now. But hey, dreaming is free.
Hi, I'm Isaac Ratson, the Public Forum Captain. Today you're going to be seeing a debate about Public Forum, an event that usually encompasses real-world issues. It looks at things like North Korea's nuclear missile systems, or the U.S. military presence in the Middle East, and it questions whether we should or should not handle these things in the future and how we should go about that. The debate that you're going to be seeing today comes from some of Heritage's finest debaters, and it's questioning whether we should or should not implement a universal basic income in our current day. Thank you and have a great time watching.
We affirm, resolve, the United States should replace means-tested welfare programs with a universal basic income. First, we'd like to define what a UBI is. A universal basic income, or a UBI, is the fixed income every adult would automatically receive from the government. The most common plan for a UBI comes from Andrew Yang, who proposed a UBI of $1,000 per month, which adds up to $12,000 per year. Means-tested welfare programs, on the other hand, are governmental programs that provide services to people based on what their income is. Common examples are food stamps, welfare, and Medicaid. With that being said, our sole contention is domestic violence. Financial abuse has locked women into abusive relationships without anywhere else to go. Allstate in 2019 writes that by blocking or controlling financial assets, abusers coerce their victims into staying with them, locking them into a cycle of abuse. In fact, 98% of domestic violence victims experience financial abuse, leaving victims helpless and without resources for many years. Abusive partners prevent their partners from obtaining steady revenue, as Renzulli in 2014 finds victims' partners exerted economic control to prevent them from leaving, keeping them from getting jobs, running up debts on their credit cards, and restricting access to money. Fortunately, a UBI gives a woman the purchasing power necessary to escape this cycle and break social barriers. Ancelotti in 2019 finds a basic income, a periodic unconditional cash payment, correlated with significant declines in rates of violence. In households where women receive cash transfers, rates of physical and sexual violence declined by as much as 66%. Extra payments gave women leverage to resist violence and leave their relationship. Domestic violence continues to persist until a UBI is implemented. Black 11 writes that more than 1 in 3, or 42 million women, have experienced violence by a partner in their lifetime. Thus we proudly affirm.
We negate resolve the United States should replace means-tested welfare programs with a universal basic income. Our sole contention is boosting the economy. The Council of Economic Advisors in 2019 states that the current economic expansion became the longest in U.S. history, and given the record length of the economic expansion, positive GDP growth points to the economy remaining strong in future quarters. Unfortunately, a universal basic income would decrease the current economic growth for two key reasons. The first is inflation. Because corporations know that consumers have an increased ability to purchase goods, our Cheto 2018 states that if everyone suddenly had an extra $12,000 a year, prices would go up and inflation would rise, thus negating the perceived gains of such a program. Likewise, Amadeo 2019 finds that most people would immediately spend the extra cash, spending retailers to struggle to order more supply, and if they couldn't, they would raise prices. This is empirically proven, as Anami and Lustig in 2018 finds that since the introduction of the reform in Iran, inflation has severely eroded the real value of the transfer, and there was a cumulative 136.5% increase in prices. But the second is disengagement. A universal basic income would disincentivize people from finding work or staying in their current jobs. UBI changes households' decision calculus about whether or not to work because families become complacent with the monthly UBI checks. For this reason, Vicente in 2017 explained that in the Seattle Denver experiment, a UBI reduced the length of employment by 15% and increases the length of unemployment by at least 42.3%, which is why Dwar in 2018 finds that unconditional payments were found to cause a near 14% decline in labor force participation. These two reasons are why Smetters in 2020 finds that a UBI would increase the federal debt by 81.1% and GDP would fall by 9.3%, thus leading to a recession. The next economic shock will be devastating, as Bradford in 2013 warns that as many as 900 million people could fall back into poverty in the event of an economic shock like the Great Recession. Thus, we negate.
Okay, so let's talk about your disengagement argument. You claim that people will stop working when they get a UBI. However, wouldn't they just use that money to pursue a career they've always wanted to pursue or become an entrepreneur or something of that sort?
I would say no, because it's easier to sit at home and do nothing when you have $12,000 more that you have. Instead of having to work for that, you get it for free right into your bank account. You don't have to do anything for that except just be a citizen. So that's why you're just gonna stop working, because you just have free money. Now you don't need to work because you're already getting money. But I'm gonna ask a question.
Okay.
How can we solve for this domestic violence crisis if the economy is going down?
Well, I'll contest a couple crucial things. First, Shar is going to go over rebuttal and tell you that a UBI will actually increase the economy, and that any inflation or disengagement will be solved back because of UBI, because of the way it restructures the market. And second, I would contest that $1,000 a month, it may not be enough to comfortably live off, but it's better than the alternative of being abused every single day. So by allowing these women to leave their relationships with $1,000 per month, it internally solves the issue.
The negation's first argument is talking about economic inflation, but we have three responses to this. The first is that you shouldn't buy all of their hypothetical evidence, because empirically in the real world, when we implemented a UBI, it lowered the inflation rate to literally zero. It happened in Alaska, Mexico, Kuwait, India, and even Kenya. But then second, their argument only looks at the short term and not the long term. In the long term, prices will actually decrease, as Kialo in 2019 finds that because a UBI increases competition between goods, companies make new improved products, lowering the price of the old good. This allows everyone to have access to more advanced products and basic goods at affordable prices. But then third, prices of basic goods like food will always become inflated regardless of which side you vote for because of climate change. Paul of Market Watch in 2018 explains that because of rising temperatures, prices of food and water are expected to increase by as much as 84%, even without a universal basic income. So they don't actually solve for basic commodities such as food and water. But now on to their second argument about how people will leave their jobs. There are three reasons why this argument just doesn't make sense. The first comes from Bowman in 2018 of AEI, who explains that people won't just quit their jobs because they have another source of money. This is because they find that over 70% of Americans say that they would enjoy having a job even if they didn't need the money. That means that the people who need the help the most, like the women who are suffering from domestic abuse, benefit while making sure that no one quits their jobs. But then second response is that a UBI restructures the labor market, which allows more people to hold jobs. Marks and Peters in 2008 explains that the introduction of a UBI stimulates entrepreneurial activity, creating even more jobs because now people have the money to create companies that they couldn't create without it. But then the third response is that workers would have a financial backing under a UBI to choose a job of their liking, since they have a cushion even if the job pays less. This makes it so that people truly enjoy their jobs and discourages them from even leaving. That means that our side is the one that actually solves back for their very own arguments.
On their sole contention about protecting the rights of women, we read you 4 key responses. The first is that their argument is counterproductive to improving the social standing of women. Danaher in 2014 explains that a universal basic income entrenches the gender roles in the division of labor by incentivizing women to succumb to the social role of caregiver. Thus, we should not replace means-tested welfare with a UBI, as a UBI will only make the situation worse. But secondly, O'Reilly writes that a universal basic income does not do enough to replace welfare programs that help women, as there are no childcare benefits. When we remove the welfare programs absolutely essential to supporting children, women who leave abusive relationships will not be able to provide for their children on the proposed $1,000 per month, and with no welfare will be put in a dire situation. Thus, the negative side is the only place to vote in this round, as we can both save the economy and stop a UBI from ruining the ability of women to leave abusive relationships. Third is that the third fallacy in their argument lies in the nature of these relationships. At the point when many families share financial accounts, Abusers in relationships will simply use the same financial manipulation tactics that our opponents claim are already being used. The universal basic income will be used as leverage against women trying to leave an abusive relationship, meaning that if you vote for the affirmative in this debate, you are only making the problem they describe worse. But fourth and finally, the proposal they suggest of $1,000 per year is simply not enough for someone to be financially stable after leaving a relationship in which both partners contributed to an overall income. Means-tested welfare, the type of assistance we are promoting, is the only way we solve the issue of financial instability, as this form of support accommodates based on the situation at hand and thus will make sure everyone gets the help they need. Realize that a universal basic income takes from the poor and gives to the rich. Jeff Bezos does not need financial support, but those in poverty do. Thus, vote for the negative to stop this counterproductive transfer of funds and save those who need the money the most. Thank you.
So your argument is that a UBI will cause inflation to occur due to increased prices. But my question is, how exactly does more money being spent actually hurt our economy?
So the problem here isn't really money being spent, but it's more how much money. So the inflation here is really coming from a lack of supply. When the government gives the people trillions of dollars overnight, like we're talking about with a universal basic income, the amount people spend will obviously increase, and stores across the nation will not be able to keep up with this spike in demand, and thus will have to increase their prices in order to try to slow down that crazy demand that's started.
That makes sense.
I'm gonna ask a question now. You claim that $1,000 per month is enough to escape an abusive relationship. How can someone live on $1,000 per month?
Okay, so see, once they leave the abusive relationship, they have the freedom to get a job and have more financial independence. Because right now, due to the relationship itself, they're being very restricted. So at the end of the day, though it may seem like the UBI is just $1,000 per month, the path it lays out is where it's so much more that it's always going to be beneficial.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Our opponents would like to frame welfare as a perfect system, while ignorantly ignoring its problematic past. Ultimately, welfare programs have not provided ground to solve domestic violence, a societal issue all around us. There will always be economic issues in society. However, this is one issue we can finally solve with the UBI. Our only contention is domestic violence. And the status quo means that welfare programs do not give adequate ground for women to escape abusive relationships. However, with a UBI, women would have the money necessary to escape them. In fact, Anne's Lottie writes that UBI has decreased domestic violence by 66% in places where it has been implemented. Ultimately, a UBI would free 42 million women from abusive relationships. On their first response about UBI harming the social standing of women, I would contest that the opposite is true. By giving women a monthly check of $1,000 a month, we are allowing them to have the flexibility to branch out and do the careers they are passionate about. Finally, abusive partners prevent women from getting jobs. A UBI allows them to leave these relationships, allowing them to get jobs. On the second refutation that discussed that women would not be able to pay for their children. This is inherently wrong, as a child will receive a UBI, allowing a mother to pay for these expenses. Next, they tend to point out a third fallacy in our arguments, saying that due to the nature of these relationships, the abusive partner would take the money. However, I would argue that unfortunately my opponents do not understand the nature of a UBI. Under a UBI, the money is directly attached to the person, meaning only the woman would be able to access it, freeing them from the relationship. Their fourth refutation describes that $12,000 isn't enough to support a single person. However, I would believe there are several fallacies in this argument. The first is $12,000 is in fact enough to live off, as I personally lived off it. The second is that not living in the best conditions is better than being abused every single day. Thus, we urge an affirmative ballot.
The means-tested welfare system will always be better than a UBI because it goes straight to the poor, the people who need it the most, instead of everyone. In addition, we would argue that you should prefer our contention on recession because if there is a recession and the economy goes down, the value of a UBI becomes worthless and it won't be able to solve for problems like domestic violence. But because of that, we believe inflation is the most important argument in this round. We tell you that inflation will go up when a UBI is implemented because the increased demand won't match the supply of the retailers. That's why in Iran, the price of goods went up 136%, but specifically on their responses. On their first response, how is empirically proving that inflation went down, they don't give a reason why it went down. In reality, these were short-term implementations of a UBI compared to our long-term UBI. While on their second response about increased competition, I would argue that this scenario never happens because if they want to make more goods and still make a profit, they would have to raise prices because demand goes up but supply stays the same. While on their third response about 2%, I would say that the runaway inflation caused by the UBI cannot be solved by the Fed because it acts as a cascade effect where inflation skyrockets over time. On their final response about food prices going up, they never tell you when this happens. We tell you as soon as you affirm, inflation occurs. On to their case. Remember what we tell you in rebuttal. The abuser is going to just take the money away from the victim. Because of that happens with means-tested welfare as well. All they say is that it will go into the social security accounts, but there are two key fallacies with this. First, they don't give any proof for this claim, and I would say families would access a UBI the same way families access means-tested welfare. But secondly, the abuser can just force the victims to take the money out of the social security account, just like what is happening right now, as the abuser forces the victim to give them money. For all of those reasons, I must urge a neg ballot.
Why should we prioritize helping the economy over helping the people who need the help the most?
Okay, so we would tell you two things here. First, realize that helping those in economic struggles while sacrificing the strength of our economy doesn't help anyone involved and will only really make things worse. But secondly, we explain that voting for your argument is counterproductive for helping women escape these abusive relationships, thus the only place to vote in this debate is for the negative.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna take a question. How can you be sure that the $1,000 we're giving to those in abusive relationships through a UBI won't be used as even more leverage against them?
So the answer here comes from the true difference between a UBI and means-tested welfare. Means-tested welfare goes to a family and is calculated based on the needs of that family, such as how many children they support and multiple other factors that the spouse influences as well. A UBI is individually based, meaning that the money we are giving people will go straight to them, not a family account that can be compromised. That's essential because that means that the women now have even more security for the money they are receiving, which is an inherent difference between means-tested welfare right now. Throughout this round, our narrative has been the same. Economic issues will always exist in the world, however, a universal basic income allows for the end of domestic violence, a societal issue that means-tested welfare programs have repeatedly failed to address. They say that if a recession were to happen, a UBI would become worthless. However, during a recession, a UBI is even more helpful, since people who are losing their jobs or struggling financially still get aid every single month. Our argument is very simple. A UBI would provide financial stability for women who are in abusive relationships, allowing them a path to prosperity. They say that the abuser will take away the money. However, as I said in Crossfire, a UBI is much more secure since it is individually based instead of linked to a family. But secondly, the woman can leave the relationship the moment she receives the money, leaving no time for the abuser to interfere. A UBI even solves their own arguments about inflation, since when looking at historical examples, inflation literally went to zero. They give you one example, we give you 5. That's why you should vote for the affirmative to make a real change in the world.
There are two ways to vote in this round, against them or for us. Both are for the good of the people. First, we have proven to you that the justification they present to you for why we should utilize a UBI instead of means-tested welfare is simply incomplete. Although it seems logical, digging deeper proves their argument cannot operate in the real world. The $1,000 per month payment that they provide will not be enough to allow women escaping abusive relationships to support themselves or their children, as this payment does not account for the severity of one's situation. Furthermore, a vote for them means a vote against the economy. We provided you two crucial reasons why a UBI would force our economy into ruins. The first was inflation. When each consumer is provided an extra $1,000 in buying power, supply cannot meet this newfound demand and inflation ensues. Secondly, when you give people free money, such as in a universal basic income, they will simply reduce their participation in the workforce. Means-tested welfare includes work requirements, a UBI does not. Thus, vote for the negative to preserve the ability for women to leave abusive relationships along with saving our economy. Thank you.
My Aunt Pooja is a little superstitious, but not in the basic white person way, like crossing a black cat or walking under a ladder. You see, Pooja Auntie is brown, So she's on a whole nother level. And ever since she discovered the World Wide Web, her superstitions have turned her into a conspiracy theory junkie. She now believes that the moon landing was faked, the earth is flat, and that the coronavirus is being spread through 5G internet. Because, quote, I saw an article on Facebook.com. The fact that these outrageous conspiracies get so much coverage and attention is hilarious, but also kind of concerning. When fact and fiction are given equal airtime, innocent consumers become casualties of misinformation. In our attempt to appear unbiased and objective, we've created something called false balance. The Washington Post describes false balance as giving equal weight to unsupported or even discredited claims for the sake of seeming impartial. However, while robust debate is vital for a democratic society, spreading misinformation for the sake of balance results in deception, division, and dangerous controversy. Because when people deny the science that proves the threat of climate change or ignore social distancing guidelines because of false balance, it's our duty to tip the scales back to reality. So today, to fight the pandemic of false balance, let's first understand what causes false balance to occur. Next, examine its harmful effects before finally finding some solutions that even Pooja Auntie can use. Another conspiracy Auntie told me about was the Mount Rushmore theory. Apparently, many believe there's a room behind Lincoln's head that hides government treasures and hidden secrets. So for all we know, the movie National Treasure was a documentary. But just like the room behind Lincoln's head, we need to understand what happens in our heads. Why do we fall for false balance? Truth be told, we fall for it because of something called motivated reasoning, or as Psychology Today puts it, the bias toward a decision that conforms to what a person already knows, and it occurs outside of awareness that anything sneaky is going on. We tend to pay more heed to the way information falls in line with our pre-existing beliefs, rather than to whether or not that information is actually accurate. If there's even a sliver of doubt that supports our ideas, we cling to that and ignore any contrary evidence, no matter how overwhelming it may be. That's why Pooja Auntie always says, "It's just my opinion." And this tendency to believe anything that supports our ideas is being exploited by the media. Which brings us to our second cause. The monetization of our motivated reasoning is seen clearly in the false balance created by social media and news outlets. In her article, The Distorting Reality of False Balance in the Media, author Katrina Huvel states that, unfortunately, too much of the media has become increasingly fixated on finding balance, even if that means providing content to simply cater to a bias. Take, for example, the climate change issue. As we know, scientists around the world have consistently provided indisputable evidence of rising global temperatures, rising sea levels, and extreme weather conditions, all caused by human emissions. But on April 22nd of 2017, CNN aired a televised debate between a climate change denier and a climate change expert, a scientist, and the only guy to rap about the water cycle, Bill Nye the Science Guy. During the debate, even Bill Nye noted that CNN was doing a disservice by having one climate change skeptic instead of 97 or 98 scientists or engineers concerned about climate change. A disservice. You know, Bill Nye couldn't have put it any better, because this spread of misinformation through false balance can be catastrophic. And the first effect is that it legitimizes false information, putting our lives at risk, which is particularly true in the coronavirus pandemic. While medical professionals emphasize the need for social distancing due to the virus's lethal potential, there are some who continue to dispute the severity of the virus. Just last week, notorious radio personality Rush Limbaugh claimed that the COVID-19 death count is being inflated to advance a political agenda, disregarding the fact that the CDC reports that the death count is likely being seriously undercounted due to a lack of testing. Limbaugh's comments are destructive and divisive because they turn real pain into propaganda, like the pain of Maura Lewinger, who had to watch her husband Joe, a school principal and father of their 3 children, take his final breath over FaceTime, because leaving their house would likely result in the same fate for her. Limbaugh's attempt to falsely legitimize this conspiracy and undermine the magnitude of this public health crisis to his weekly audience of over 15 million Americans who are terrified, confused, and desperate for answers is dangerous and disgraceful. False balance can be just as dangerous, though, when it's used to minimize legitimate threats to our safety. Tucker Carlson, a popular Fox News host and prominent voice in conservative media, did just that. Days after the El Paso shooting, Carlson called the notion of violent white supremacy a hoax, claiming that the combined membership of every white supremacist organization in this country would be able to fit inside a college football stadium. But the main issue with Carlson's statement is that he fails to recognize the fact that according to the Anti-Defamation League in 2016, white supremacy fueled about 13% of the extremist-related killings in this country. And the fact that this number increased to 53% in a single year. He ignored the fact that one does not have to be a card-carrying member of the KKK to be a white supremacist. The El Paso shooter wasn't a member of any organization, but his 2,300-word anti-immigration manifesto screams a message heard far beyond the 100 yards of a football field. Carlson's attempt to create a debate on the existence of racism is exactly what is preventing real strides towards equality. The existence of violent white nationalism shouldn't be a debate. How we achieve equality should be. The severity of the coronavirus pandemic shouldn't be a conversation. How we flatten the curve and save American lives should be. The legitimacy of climate change shouldn't be part of our discourse. How we save our planet from this existential threat should be. And the reality of false balance shouldn't be a discussion, but how we fight against it. Now that should be. And the way we tip the scales back to reality involves 2 major components, education and accountability. The education factor of our solution goes back to the basics, discerning between facts and opinions, according to psychotherapist Stephanie Sarkis. The more we educate others about this cognitive bias, the less impact it may have on an unsuspecting public. So when skeptical opinions are presented as equals to solid evidence, pay more attention to the facts and reliable sources. Educate yourself on the reality of the subject, not by looking for arguments on procon.org. And this is where our accountability factor comes into play. When you see information sources creating false balance, call them out. You can post links to credible sources, start hashtags against unreliable ones, or even spread facts in a comment section full of opinions. In other words, use your platform the way you want others to use theirs. Tip the scales back to reality by embracing imbalance, because the solution lies not in treating sides of an issue equally, but in treating them fairly. And as renowned author and former broadcast journalist Mort Krim once said, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but none of us can afford to be wrong in our facts. Now somebody please explain that to Pooja Auntie before she posts another conspiracy theory on her MySpace page. And despite the fact that she makes me wear personal protective gear while using my phone, and Lysols my forehead before kissing me goodnight, I make a conscious effort to keep my facts straight. And I hope you all will as well. Because the more we accept the imbalance that's real in our world, the brighter our futures will be. And that isn't up for debate.
Da, 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 know a lot about the main streets of New York.
Yeah, I'm Anna.
I'm Carly.
Come on, let's get out of here.
Popular. I'm gonna be popular.
Well, here we are, home, sweet home.
Wow, it's so tiny.
Well, actually, if you imagine it from the perspective of a cockroach, it's actually kind of big. So, where are you from?
Iowa, but my family moved around a lot when I was a kid. I lived in Nebraska, Kansas, North Dakota, so I'm pretty cosmopolitan. But now I've come to New York to become a musical theater actress.
Why are you singing?
I'm pretty self-involved. I like to think of my life as one big Broadway musical. Oh, and now that we're best friends and I don't have anywhere to live, I'll move in with you.
I guess you could live in my closet.
Yay! See? What did I say? Everything's gonna be fun. I think I'm gonna like it here. The theater is a magical place.
It provides you the opportunity to play any role you could ever imagine.
For example, I was Annie in Annie.
I was sea creature number 23 in The Little Mermaid.
I played Alphabet in Wicked.
And I was a tree in my kindergarten recital.
Theater kids often get a bad rap for being weird or different. Understandable. But what many fail to realize is that we play a part every day of our lives in order to fit in. But when we enter the theater, our place of refuge, we shed our facades and celebrate our authentic selves.
The stage is Our Lady Liberty, who cries out, "Bring me your loud, your gays, your huddled messes, yearning to sing and do jazz squares."
And in true theater kid fashion, our protagonist, Carly, takes her role to the extreme.
Forgetting the role she was born to play.
Herself,
Too Fabulous to Fail.
by Don Zolaitis. 525,000. Hello, my name is Carly Jackson, and today I will be auditioning for the role of Elphaba in Wicked.
Actually, Polly, we're not doing Wicked.
We're not
doing Wicked!
Thank you for your time. 5, 6, 7, 8. I totally nailed my Elphaba audition, Anna.
That's great, Carly, but rent is due next week.
Oh my god, I love Rent.
No, rent.
Oh! How much do you think that blood plasma's worth?
Actually, Carly, most actors get a day job. I guess you could be a temp with me. Don't.
Working 9 to 5.
Oh, saw it! Right, okay, gotcha. Whoa! Skirt! You must be the new temp. I'm Spencer.
Hi, Spencer. I'm Carly. Oh, Carly Jackson. I know it's a stupid name.
Yes, stupid. Well, I gotta get back, but I look forward to working with you. Yeah.
And I look forward to working under you. Beneath you. With you. I look forward to working with you.
Carly, dating a subordinate coworker is against corporate policy. You want to hear a story? I once knew a girl who was dating her boss, and you want to know what happened to them? They died because you can't date your boss.
But Anna, I love him.
No, you don't. And we're not in a musical.
Then why is everyone singing?
You're the only one singing. Sure, Spencer might be devastatingly sexy, but he'll break your heart. Trust me.
Okay, Anna. Gimme that thing called love. Hey, Spencer, can we be honest with each other?
Yes, sure, about what?
If the rat coworker came along, you'd change the dating policy, right?
No. No dating subordinates ever. If my soulmate came along and she just happened to be a subordinate, that'd just be too bad for my soul. Alright, I'm out.
If there's anything I've learned about life or musical theater, it's that the heroine always gets the man. Attention, everyone! I have a very important announcement I'd like to sing. Can someone please start the music?
Carly, there is no music.
I guess I'm gonna have to do this on my own. I have something very important to tell of y'all, which is that my name is not Carly Jackson. I am actually the CEO of this whole company, and I've been watching y'all for the past few weeks, so let me tell you, there are gonna be some big changes around here. Now get back to making money. I'll be in my CEO office doing CEO office things.
Whoa, this whole time, you were the CEO and I had no idea. I totally thought you were this struggling actress, but I should have known that wasn't true. You're a terrible actress.
Listen, Anna. In musical theater, the heroine must go to extremely drastic measures to win over the love of the hero. Also, they'll give us raises, so you can buy a new apartment.
Carly, if you give yourself a raise, that's embezzlement.
What are they gonna do, arrest me?
Yes!
Oh. I didn't know that. Oh, Spencer! Hey, big Spender! Hey, Spencer.
Sup, boss lady?
Can we be, honest with each other?
Yeah. I actually wanted to talk to you about this email you just sent me. It says, wear tight pants tomorrow.
New dress code.
You sing a lot.
Thank you, Spencer. Look, it's time to be honest with each other. No more lying. No more denying this fire between us. So, what do you think?
It's just...
You need time. You've been lying to me about something and you're worried that I'll find out the truth about you.
No, that's not it.
Then what's the problem? You said you wouldn't date a subordinate. Well, now I'm your superior.
I don't want to date anyone at work. I just feel like things could get complicated.
Is this another level thing? I will make myself the exact same level as you if that would help.
No.
But I love you!
I'm not interested.
Well, you're fired.
Whatever.
There's a fine, fine line between reality and pretend.
Wait! Carly Jackson, you are under arrest.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Fraud, impersonation, embezzlement.
Other than those things, she had it coming. She had it coming.
So, what are you in for?
Dreaming big. How about you?
Well, I came to New York to be a musical theater actress. And now I just am like Elmo and rob tourists.
Oh my gosh. I love Elmo. This is like the best day ever.
The people in here have tried to shake me.
Oh God. Wait. I just had a great idea.
Is it a choreographed musical number?
Uh-huh. Dun, 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 dun. It's the hard knock
Life for us.
It's the hard knock life for us. Instead of treated, we get tricked. Instead of kisses, we get kicked. It's the hard knock life. That's showbiz.
Baby.
Hi everyone, my name is Christian Rodriguez and I am the Congressional Debate Captain. Today we'll be demonstrating a mock round of an actual Congress round. And basically, Congress is an event in which we simulate the actual United States Senate, and we do a mock debate of what they would do, debating real pieces of legislation that would enact real policies in our country. And we would give speeches for or against those pieces of legislation. To get into the actual procedure of what we're going to see is Aryan Ranjan, your presiding officer, who will also explain what a presiding officer is. So Aryan, take it away.
Thank you, Christian. As he said, my name is Aryan Ranjan, and I'll be your presiding officer for today's round. So I just want to go over some housekeeping rules for how this session is going to run and what I basically expect of all of you. So for speaking, it'll be standard NSDA procedure. I'll give you 1 finger for 2 minutes, 2 fingers for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, 3 fingers for 2 minutes and 55 seconds. And at 3:05, I'll lift up my hand and basically count you down like this until 3 minutes and 10 seconds. At that time, I would like you guys to stop. Do not abuse the grace period. These speeches should be around 3:05, 3:10 anyway. At 3:10, I will try to stop you either verbally or however it can work virtually. And we will be doing direct questioning. So there's 30-second blocks for direct questioning. At 20 seconds, I'll lift 1 finger up, and the same way as the speaking times, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I'll automatically move to the next speaker. So I'll put the name of whoever's next in questioning in the chat so you guys can see that. I'll be going off of precedence and recency. If you guys have any motions, please feel free to lift up your placard and I'll just address them like that. If you have a point of inquiry, you can just put it in the chat so we can move through things as quick as possible. Do you guys have any questions before we begin? All right, seeing none, we'll just move right in to debate. Is there a motion on the floor? That goes to Representative Rodriguez.
I motion to open the floor for docket nominations.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll move into docket nominations. Are there any nominations on the floor? Representative Rodriguez.
I move to nominate docket A, which consists of first a bill regarding Venezuela, and then second a bill regarding private prisons.
All right, perfect. Are there any other motions? Seeing none, we'll just move straight into vote. We'll just move into docket A, first consisting of Venezuela and second of private prisons. Just for the reference of the chamber, the first bill is a bill to shift Venezuelan policy to promote peace, which essentially removes all sanctions on Venezuela and moves towards diplomatic talks with them and the Maduro administration. So with that, we'll automatically move to an authorship. Is there an authorship? Sponsorship? That'll go to Representative Rodriguez unopposed.
Thank you. For the judges, my name is Christian Rodriguez. Rodriguez spelled R-O-D-R-I-G-U-E-Z. Whenever you're ready. Cool. Back in 2015, the Venezuelan people were suffering a crisis that the world had never seen before. They were living in a disaster caused by their tyrant known as a president, Nicolas Maduro. So they looked to the United States, hoping we would do something, hoping we would save them. And what did we do? We slapped sanction after sanction, destroying any of their hope. For that reason, I believe it is imperative we do the right thing and pass my legislation. But to understand why, let's first identify the problem occurring within Venezuela, which is the fact that their economy is being destroyed and that they are living in destitute poverty. With Claire Seal from the Congressional Research Service on November 7th of 2019 explaining that over 90% of Venezuelans live in poverty, with 7 million people being in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. They don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have medicine, and quite frankly, they don't have any way to live. But the question should be, why on earth is Venezuela like this? And the answer is quite simple. Their president, Nicolas Maduro, has been driving their economy through the ground, making sure that all of the wealth in Venezuela is going to the top, not to the people at the bottom. But we shouldn't be eliminating all of the blame from the United States as well, because our sanctions have been a key cause as to why this crisis has been worsened and not averted. With Francisco Rodriguez from Foreign Policy Magazine in January 2019 explains that when we sanctioned Venezuela's oil industry back in 2014, it was over 95% of all of Venezuela's export revenue. And when you do something that disastrous to Venezuela's economy, it doesn't just affect Nicolas Maduro, it affects everyone, including those at the bottom. By passing today's legislation, you lift those disastrous sanctions in Section 1A, making sure revenue can enter the country. Revenue goes to the people, and they don't have to suffer anymore. That is more than enough of a reason to pass. Equally important, however, is today's legislation would encourage aid to enter the country. That's because sanctions are a key reason as to why the people in Venezuela aren't getting the aid they need. With Alex Vasquez from Bloomberg News explaining in February 5th of 2019 that President Maduro has refused aid from numerous countries, mainly the United States, going as far as to burn our aid at his borders. And he cited a key reason being the fact that he finds our sanctions straight up discriminatory against Venezuela. And he's publicly stated that if we lift our sanctions, he will allow our aid into the country. Take that and also add Section 1B of today's bill, which says we would enter diplomatic talks with Maduro, and it's clearly obvious our aid will enter the country. And that is so important because Reuters on September 11th of 2019 found that if our aid were to enter the country, we could save 3.5 million lives. Pass this legislation not to bring down Maduro, but to bring liberty to Venezuelans. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We'll now move into 2 minutes of questioning. All questioners, please raise your placards at this time. My computer is lagging. Is there no one for questioning? Representative Gonzalez.
Hi, Mr. Gonzalez.
Hello. You mentioned that if we did remove our sanctions on Venezuela, Maduro stated that he would accept aid from the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you believe that Maduro is to be trusted?
Well, obviously Maduro is a horrible leader who quite obviously shouldn't really be in power. But considering the fact that Maduro has destroyed our aid in the past because of our sanctions, I think our only option is to believe what he said. And even if we shouldn't believe him, our negotiations are a key way to make sure our aid does enter the country.
Right, so considering that aid has been able to be accepted in April of last year, why is it necessary that we have lift the sanctions before we can allow aid to get in?
Well, the problem is any aid that we send to Venezuela has to either go through Juan Guaido, another leader in Venezuela who doesn't have power, or through international organizations, which means it's very hard to get the aid to the people with Maduro as a main blockade. If you lift sanctions, that makes our job a lot easier and a lot more people can get aid.
Does lifting sanctions remove Maduro from power?
Well, not necessarily, but we should be valuing the lives of Venezuelan people over Maduro.
Representative Custodia.
Hi. So what guarantees that the aid that goes to Venezuela after we lift these sanctions are going to be used correctly and won't be used towards the inhumane acts that he's been doing towards the Venezuelan people?
Right. So obviously Maduro does have a bad history of hoarding aid and hoarding resources, but luckily within the past few years, international organizations have actually had a lot of success of getting aid to the people. The Reuters article I cited was saying that because these international organizations have had success, we could save nearly 3.5 million people by sending aid to Venezuela.
Representative Bulasova.
Yeah, so how exactly do these sanctions limit Maduro's actions and power?
So in theory, by putting sanctions on Venezuela, it would restrict his wealth and therefore his ability to maintain power. But the problem is we've had sanctions for so many years that that argument really falls apart, considering the fact that even with sanctions, he's remained in power.
Do you believe that these sanctions devastate the economy, though?
Obviously, they're not the main cause, but they're a main reason why the economy got worse after Maduro came into power.
And with that, the questioning time has elapsed. The speaker may mute himself.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move into our first negation speech. All negative speakers, please raise your placards at this time. Once again, all negation speakers, please raise your placards at this time. Ms. Belasova, you have the floor.
I thank the chair. Venezuela is facing an economic devastation, and the shocking reality is that the source of this downturn is their very own leader, a corrupt dictator who completely devalues trust and humanity. The country is experiencing human rights violations, productivity deterioration, and poverty. We must continue to enforce Venezuelan policy to weaken the grasp on power by the Venezuelan dictator, negate. First, in the recent political upheaval, U.S.-backed leader Juan Guaido is trying to claim the presidency over the current Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro, but removing sanctions on Maduro right now will strengthen his regime. U.S. sanctions were meant to ensure that Maduro doesn't continue to profit from state-operated oil operations, illegal gold mining, or other business transactions that would enable the regime's criminal activity and human rights abuses. According to a February 8, 2019 New York Times article, the sanctions block banks from dealing with the Venezuelan government and the state-run oil company PDVSA. Venezuelan oil exports to the United States provides the biggest source of cash for Maduro and plummeted 40% after sanctions. This restricted the power that Maduro's administration currently has, which ultimately restrains his abilities. As long as Maduro is in power, we will continue seeing this trend of oppression. But second, the imposed sanctions on Venezuela are not responsible for the economic crisis that the country is currently experiencing. Other speakers might say that sanctions are harmful to Venezuela's economy and their people. However, this is simply incorrect. According to the 2019 Brookings Institution and Harvard University study, when analyzing several socioeconomic outcomes in Venezuela across time, it becomes clear that the bulk of deterioration in living standards occurred long before the sanctions were enacted in 2017. A March 12, 2020 article on Share America by Noel Kircher states that even though the U.S. government imposes sanctions on pro-Maduro people and businesses, it doesn't decrease the amount of aid that we contribute to Venezuela. The U.S. government provided over $656 million in life-saving aid to the Venezuelan people, however, between 2017 and 2019. All this was allocated while sanctions were in place. Additionally, President Trump's proposed FY 2021 budget includes $205 million to address Venezuelans' health and agricultural needs. The United States is simply not the issue in Venezuela's economic devastation. Representatives, U.S. sanctions are absolutely necessary and effective. Venezuela's economy and people are suffering as a result of a cruel, impractical dictatorship, which is why we must continue implementing sanctions for the good of the economy and humanity. Negate.
Thank you for that speech of 2 minutes and 49 seconds. We're now in line for 2 minutes of questioning. All questioners, please raise your placards. Representative Marwaha.
Hi. So if the United States, if like Representative Rodriguez said, if Venezuela keeps denying our aid at the border, why will this help Venezuela at all?
Well, what I'm saying is that while we're implementing these sanctions, we're not just stopping from helping Venezuela. We are still giving aid. Even if they deny it, we're not the cause of their devastation.
Yeah, we're still giving aid, but it's not getting through,
Yes,
right?
while we're sanctioning, we're still giving.
Representative Rodriguez.
Hi, so I wholeheartedly agree. We are not the sole cause of the suffering in Venezuela. But if our sanctions restricted so much money from entering the country, doesn't that negatively affect the people?
Well, in the long term, our sanctions actually reduce the power that their dictator has. And
how long have we had sanctions on Venezuela? For a long time, right?
Yes.
If we've had sanctions on Venezuela for such a long time, why isn't Maduro out of power?
Well,
Representative
Seeing as Venezuela is currently losing $60 million like every day due to the sanctions, why is having sanctions in place going to suddenly, like having humanitarian aid going to end the crisis?
Well, I'm not saying that it will end the crisis, but okay, the main point is not the aid. The main point is that we are doing sanctions to reduce the power of Maduro's basically, and his attempts to devastate the economy.
Right. So when people see the United States cutting off their aid and supplies, why do they blame the Maduro's regime?
Representative Custodio.
So do you believe that these sanctions are the cause of the many human rights violations that are going on in Venezuela right now?
I do not. That's why I stated in my speech that Maduro is the fundamental source of the problem.
So if we keep sanctioning him, don't you think that he's going to increase the amount of human rights violations because we see that we're directly impacting his businesses?
No, because by sanctioning him, Maduro actually loses the power and business transactions and illegal gold mining. So he does not get enough finances to basically do his
And
impact.
with that, question time has elapsed. Speaker may mute himself. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, all affirmative speakers, please raise your placards at this time. Representative Marwaha, you have the floor.
I thank the chair. If I could have any indication when you're ready. All right. Venezuela, a country known to have one of the most corrupt governments in the world. A country whose currency has become so inflated that to buy anything you have to pay thousands of dollars. But most importantly, a country that needs hope. And because today's legislation provides exactly that, we must affirm. So first, pass today's legislation because right now we are the H in hope, hurting the Venezuelan people. That's because the sanctions that we have in place are hurting the economy, which in turn is worsening the living conditions of the people that are living there. According to the New York Times, the most recent round of oil sanctions has costed over $10 billion of loss to the oil industry, equivalent to more than 2/3 of the country's imports last year. Considering that this is so impactful for their economy, this has caused massive job loss and a decrease in wages. The article further that Venezuela has lost 3.3 million jobs since Maduro was elected. The number one cause of this is United States sanctions. And when innocent people's lives are getting at risk because of our inability to act, I draw the line. Affirmed. Next, the negation might come up here and tell you that we aren't listening to what the people want, and these sanctions aren't the reason that their lives are getting ruined. But if that's the case, then why did the recent pollster, Datencorp, find that 68% of Venezuelans believe that sanctions have negatively affected their quality of life? So let's listen to the people, look at the signs, and affirm. Second, because we must pass because of the O in hope, the overwhelming refugee crisis. That's because the amount of people leaving the country is overwhelming the countries around it. According to the New York Times, in 2019, 4 million people have left Venezuela since the crisis started in 2014. Out of that number, 1.5 million people have entered Colombia. That shows that our bad foreign policy decision is affecting not just Venezuela, but all of the countries around it. Colombia and other countries simply just can't keep up with the refugees. According to the International Crisis Group in 2017, Colombia has deployed 1,500 to 2,000 troops on the Venezuela border to try to prevent against the flow of refugees entering the country. The government of Colombia is forced to spend time, money, and effort combating a crisis that they have absolutely nothing to do with. The entire region's stability is at stake with this one conflict in Venezuela. But by passing today's legislation and cutting out our sanctions, we would stop hindering Venezuela's economic growth, and with it, the massive refugee outflow that is coming out of the country. And finally, the PE in hope. Your personal ethics. Representatives, people are dying because of our actions. Make the moral choice. Value the well-being of people over everything else in this round, and affirm.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. We're now in line for 1 minute of questioning. All questioners, please raise your placards. Representative Rodriguez.
Hi, Mr. Marwaha. So when we lift sanctions off of Venezuela, the money would naturally just go to President Maduro, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Historically, what has Maduro done with the money?
All right, I get where you're going to. Right, this money will be caused towards worsening the people's lives, but we need to realize that our sanctions and taking the United States out of the picture is the best we can do to help the people right now.
But if Maduro is just going to hoard all of the wealth, how would the people benefit?
Yeah, right. The people won't benefit, but that's.
Then why are we passing this bill?
Because right now the United States is hurting the people more with our sanctions.
That questioning time has elapsed. There is still one more block of 30 seconds. Would anybody like to take it? seeing nobody.
I
Just to make
believe
sure.
that
I think you're lagging
Custodio.
two people who had it.
Belisova.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't hear anybody. There's lag.
Yeah. Anastasia and Christian are raising their placards. I think you're just lagging a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I don't see him. But sorry about that. So we'll give that to Miss Belisova.
Thank you. So you're saying that sanctions are the main reason of the economic devastation, but didn't the economic decline start before sanctions on Maduro?
Okay, I get where you're coming from, but like Representative Wu said, the sanctions are costing them $60 million a year. Isn't that substantial?
Okay.
America, freedom, Jesus, barreling down on the 5th consecutive term. Ladies and gentlemen of North Carolina, Congressman today, Vice President tomorrow, Cam Brady.
Farmers are this nation's backbone. Bankers are this nation's backbone. Poultry processors, liquor store owners, and audio installation specialists are this nation's backbone.
Woo! We love you, Cam!
Oh. Hey there, beautiful. I'm Cam Brady. I want you to lick my feet.
Charles, do you see our boy in the 6th District? He's struggling at 32% now.
Oh, remember when he gave that speech with a condom stuck to his jacket the whole time?
He changed his Facebook relationship status to cruising for strange.
Oh, can't believe he's being thought of for vice president. We got to get him out of there.
Who do we know in North Carolina that we can put on the 6th District ballot? Stop, stay. Scott. Sorry, he has hip dysplasia, which is very common for a pug of his age and girth.
Marty!
Oh, hey, Dad, I
was just reading the National Review. Don't bullcrap me, Marty. Listen, I got a call from the March Brothers.
The March Brothers? Oh, they're big time.
Yes, they are, Marty. I'm glad you recognize that. They want you to step up, run against Cam.
Really? Me? You hear that, F. Scott? Daddy's gonna be a congressman. Yeah, that's right.
Damn it, shut up. Look, they'll back you, and you'll have a lot of money behind you. You can't lose. And as soon as you're in office, you're going to vote for what the March Brothers tell you to. That's it.
Daddy, I'm gonna make you so proud.
That is not an option.
America's political campaigns are a safe haven for truth and morality, the crux of an impenetrable, indestructible democracy. Don't believe me? Good, you shouldn't. That was a lie. Democracy is a lie. We're all doomed! Because, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, roughly 40% of the $5 billion generated during the 2018 midterm elections came from only 37,000 donors. That's 1,000th of 1% of the American population. It's going to take a lot to change that kind of influence, or, as Marty, pug enthusiast and newest North Carolinian congressional candidate, is about to find out. All it takes to stand up to corruption is to expose it. The Campaign by Chris Henchy and Sean Harwell. I just want to say I'm very excited about running. My daddy told me 2 things about speeches. 1, don't say anything about the Jews. And 2, and with a funny story. So I have these 2 pugs. F. Scott. And Zelda. Funny story. F. Scott likes to hide under the sofa. And Zelda always starts yapping like, "You're not going under the sofa." And then I walk in and I see Zelda barking and I'm like, F. Scott, are you under the sofa? Anyway, that's my funny story. Vote for me.
That was terrible!
Oh. I'm sorry, Daddy.
This is Tim Watley, image consultant, and Watley's gonna make sure you play those 3 strings like a frickin' maestro. And as soon as you're in office, you're going to vote in favor of Bill H.R. 5380.
5380, but I don't even know what that is.
No need. I already handled this group. Here are your answers for the next debate. Just stick to the script. And when you meet Camus center stage, he's gonna shake your hand. But don't let go. Pull him in close. Maintain a smile and say something horrible. Set the tone.
Oh. That seems unfair. Please welcome new candidate Marty Huggins and Congressman Cam Brady. Thank you. Thank you.
Marty Huggins, best of luck.
Oh, I don't need luck. Because I'm about to disrupt your world. I'm going to buy you movies and make you pay for them, even if you don't watch them. Ha!
Marty, are you trash talking me? I like that.
Gentlemen, we'd love to get started. Thank you, Marty Huggins and Congressman Cam Brady, for choosing Jimmy Carter Middle School as the site of this first debate. And the student has our first question.
Goody Kirkland, 6th grade. I'm sorry. You said 6th grade?
Yes, I was held back.
Congressman Brady, with current high rate of foreclosure, what is your plan to stimulate new home construction and maintain home ownership?
What I think is we need to identify the root of the foreclosure problem before stimulating new home growth. If I may, I actually have a plan. To provide tax cuts to local general contractors, suppliers, and real estate investors. I am not a Washington insider like Cam is.
Thank you, Mr. Huggins. That is winning answer.
You have my vote. If I could vote. There's our guy, Charles March. Welcome aboard, Marty. I'm Wade March. Oh, what a pleasure to meet you guys. Thank you for everything.
Actually, we just wanted to tell you thank you.
As soon as you're in office, you're going to vote in favor of Bill H.R. 5380. With you on our side, it'll give us the majority in the House to get that eminent domain bill through. We're going to make billions, Marty. Did you guys know that allows states to turn over public land like parks and monuments to private corporations? That just doesn't seem right.
Marty, we see your concern, and rightfully so. But what do you tell the dad who can't feed his 7 kids because he doesn't have a job, and his wife is robo-tripping off cough syrup?
I guess you make a pretty good point. It just seems unfair.
Damn it, Marty! This is how this country works! You can win this! You have to win this! Bills like this may seem nasty and mean, but once they happen, people get jobs, people get places to live, and some people get rich! I know you think you're doing the right thing, but I need you to do the difficult thing.
Daddy, I just don't understand why I would be elected just so the March brothers get land to develop.
Marty! Don't disappoint me!
Initial results between challenger Marty Huggins and Cam Brady are as follows. The winner, by 3 votes, is Marty Huggins? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love this place. It's where my daddy taught me to hunt. We used to go a couple times a year.
What are you doing, Marty?
Yeah, it's the only memory I have of my dad actually hugging me. You know, I ran because I just wanted to make my daddy proud. That's all. But now, I think I can actually make a difference. I told the March brothers I wouldn't accept their money or vote on that eminent domain bill. This is public land, part of a state park. That's why we all get to go. I'm Marty Huggins. Thank you for your vote.
Marty, Daddy, damn it, shut up! Nice job. Don't let people see you hugging your dad. You look weak. And now your work is just getting started.
You hear that, F. Scott?
After 4 long years of taking AP classes, playing sports and instruments, and volunteering while somehow balancing it all with speech and debate, I'm finally a senior. And I'm dying inside. I have an illness, and that illness is senioritis. Symptoms include sleeping for a max of 4 hours a night, walking into class 15 minutes late, and sometimes mistakenly calling your teacher Mom. I only get to exercise by pressing my luck, and I haven't seen the sun in years. But don't get me wrong. I love learning and competing. But this love for what I do is precisely what pushes me to overwork. You see, passion is often a major contributor to burnout, because we're taught that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. But this labor of love can lead to a hatred for the thing you were once so passionate about. A study by psychologists from the University of Montreal reports that passion-driven labor breeds obsessive behavior, which inevitably leads to burnout. And the World Health Organization has even introduced burnout into its international classification of diseases. So, yeah, senioritis, it's terminal. So today, let's understand a little bit more about this exhaustion epidemic. First, by examining... You know what? I'm too tired for a drawn-out roadmap. Causes, effects, solutions. Let's go. You see, every speech before this one had really intricate transitions. I used to spend hours trying to craft the perfect segue. Now, this is what you get. But our pursuit of perfection is precisely what pushes us to burn out. We constantly find ourselves burdened with countless expectations, and these high standards manifest as overwork, which ultimately does more harm than good. Professors at York St. John University conducted a study on 200 young athletes who exhibited perfectionist concerns, which are tendencies to keep working far past a reasonable limit. They found that the higher these perfectionist concerns, the more burnout the athlete experienced. Except Simone Biles, that queen did a perfect triple somersault right out of the womb. But take, for example, Jacques Mariage-Coudel, an endurance runner who's on track to become the first female athlete to complete the Grand Slam Plus. After years of endless training, Coudel admits to feeling burnt out and is struggling to find the line between competition and recovery. When we become set on this perfection, whether in academics, athletics, or in a career, our passion transforms into obsession. And not like my newfound obsession with caffeine, but more like the coconut water and Pilates type obsession. Deadly. When you're in love with what you do, your job, debate, Candy Crush, it's harder to distinguish between hard work and overwork. When they say love is blind, they're right. Our passion for what we do can lead to burnout before we even realize it. In 2004, award-winning comedian Dave Chappelle was at the height of his career. After signing a $50 million contract for the next 2 seasons of his talk show, Chappelle suddenly disappeared mid-production. He spent 2 weeks in South Africa before returning home. And when explaining his absence to stunned fans, Chappelle said, "I wasn't crazy, but it is incredibly stressful." This man walked away from $50 million because his dream career had turned into a world of pain. And his situation isn't uncommon. When we become burnt out, we begin to resent what we once loved. In 2018, the Physicians Foundation surveyed American medical professionals to better understand who they are and how they practice. 72% reported feeling burnt out, and almost half say they wouldn't recommend medicine as a career to their children. Like the way physicians put themselves second, so they can put their patients first, mental health ultimately takes a backseat to passion. But this just isn't sustainable. And we see instances of these burned out work lovers every day in our teachers. Teachers who give endlessly for the people they love and the things that they love. Teachers who provide the only hot meals some kids eat, the only hug or word of encouragement. These noble servants have chosen a life educating others, and they go the extra mile to help the students who need it most, both in and out of the classroom. I've seen it myself during the hardest part of my life, when I just lost my father. And it was my 8th grade teacher who would drive me home when my single working mother couldn't. As speech and debate students, we have front row seats to this exact sort of selflessness in our coaches. I'm not exaggerating when I say my coaches probably get less rest than anyone else I know. And they look it. They sacrifice countless weekends for tournaments, fly all over the country away from their families, and serve not only as our coaches, but also as part-time parents, nurses, and mental health professionals. Our coaches love what they do, and they love us. But this blind passion, this giving of yourself endlessly without break only leads to a complete shutdown. And it's my hope for all our coaches that they remember to take time for themselves, because it would be a travesty if they weren't here to guide future generations of awkward and quiet students like we once were. Luckily for us and them, one of the easiest ways to prevent burnout is as simple as managing our time. A 2015 Forbes article recommends taking the action step approach. We determine what's needed in order to alleviate our stress and then give ourselves deadlines. Action steps usually take the form of what and by when. For example, if you've been working all week long and can feel yourself reaching your breaking point, make an action step to take a hot bath, the what, on Friday night, the when. This will help you prioritize your me time, which will in turn help you get a better grasp on your workload. And if you've already fallen down the burnout hole and need help climbing out, don't worry, I got you. A 2017 Harvard Business Review article recommends questioning your assumptions about the way life has to be and the things you have to do. Do you have to be working on this until 4 a.m.? Can't you leave your work at work for tonight? My speech coach himself has told me that sometimes he tells himself he has to leave school by 6, or else he knows he'll spend his entire evening working with the team. A lot of the time, we have more options than we think we do. For most of us, this tournament was an option. We're here because we wanted to compete, because we love to compete. But raise your virtual hand if you actually got more than 6 hours of sleep last night. Liar. But trade-offs are trade-offs, and we have to learn how to prioritize ourselves above all. So I guess I'll just have to fight it out through this last month. I've been learning how to prioritize too. In this hectic senior season, I've cut out one of my sports to make more time for college applications. I've also set aside Friday nights as no homework nights, where I just watch Netflix with my mom and recover from the week. Steps to prevent or even recover from burnout don't always have to be complicated. Peace of mind can be as simple as just a little bit of self-care. I'd keep talking, but I think I'm starting to get hives from putting effort into something for more than 5 minutes. Who knows? Maybe I'll patent a cure for senioritis. Maybe I'll call it Genicillin. But we all experience burnout one way or another. And unfortunately, there's no pill to swallow. So it's important that we're proactive in setting healthy boundaries so we can continue doing what we love for as long as we can. Virtual graduation is just around the corner. And even though it's hard, I'll continue this labor of love. Because it's worth it.
Hi, my name is Emlyn Matthew, and I do LD, or Lincoln Douglas Debate. Lincoln Douglas Debate focuses on solving real-world problems by using a philosophical and/or practical lens. Now, what makes us different is that we are a one-on-one individual debate and center around taking moral actions. Some advantageous skills that we develop involve creating unique solutions, developing new perspectives, and enhancing critical thinking. Thank you, and I hope you decide to join.
Hi, my name is Emlyn, and this is Mary, and we're going to start our LD round. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay. I affirm the resolution resolved in the United States, colleges and universities ought not consider standardized tests in undergraduate admissions decisions. My framework for evaluating the resolution is minimizing oppression. To clarify, this means a side which reduces suffering among society's most vulnerable populations should win the debate. According to the Center for American Progress in 2019, now more than ever, it is critical for policymakers specifically looking at potential impacts on communities that do not identify as white or have large concentrations of families with low incomes. Ongoing gaps in college access and completion ultimately result in a wealth gap that will take more than 100 years to close if nothing changes. The data makes clear how historic and systemic inequalities in educational opportunity have created a debt that must be paid. Thus, my sole argument is Native exclusion. Standardized tests ignore Native American students. According to Elise Trumbull and Sharon Barber writing for the Journal in 2019, much is known about how to make the assessment culturally responsive for Indigenous students, but standardized tests extinguish Indigenous languages and cultures. These tests have served as a barrier to Native entry to college, and Kelly Field, writing in the Chronic of Higher Education in 2016, argues, as a group, American Indian students are least likely to enroll in college, yet because Native American students make up just 1% of the population, they're often overlooked in discussions about the nation's achievement gap. These educational disparities have taken their toll, and according to Kristen Noonpa in 2014, Indigenous peoples experience as a group the most extreme poverty, the greatest rates of malnutrition, death by exposure, and infant mortality of any group on the continent, and the average lifespan is approximately 30 years shorter than that of a USD or American. Fortunately, college access is a truly empowering solution. Abby Rush, an enrolled member of the 3 Native tribes in 2019, argues, higher education is one way that Native people can gain more knowledge to become politicians, health and legal professionals, and ultimately bring an improvement communities. Native people who choose to pursue higher education can counteract generations of oppression by using knowledge and skills to heal Native homelands and communities. And Katrina Boone, a senior analyst with Bellwether Education Partners, concludes in December of 2018. For too long, the education system has served as a weapon against Native Americans. It's time that it becomes a tool for righting our nation's wrongs.
Okay, ready for class?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's start with your framework. Why is focusing on only vulnerable populations a valuable mindset? Like, why not care about everyone?
Because generally we tell you that these vulnerable populations are often overlooked. Like I read in my case, Native American populations, while they're small, they suffer the most disparities out of like any US population. So we think to target structural violence issues, we first have to look at the populations that are often
Okay, so
overlooked.
if we prove that like this, like I guess abolishing standardized tests causes violence to both like Indigenous groups as well as other populations, such as like, for example, like Hispanic populations, does that account under your framing mechanism, or is that like only Indigenous people?
I'd say we're mainly trying to focus on Indigenous people because, like we said, they're the #1 group that are often overlooked.
Next question. Let's talk about the NINFA evidence. It says that it causes like a lot of death, for example. But what is like the reason as to why not getting into colleges causes like death or like malnutrition?
Okay, so when students obviously don't get into college, they can suffer disparities of not getting higher education. And in like today's society, it's often seen that if you get higher education, you can like obviously get better jobs, better high-paying jobs mostly. And so when students can't go to college, can't get those good educations.
Yeah, but how does that cause malnutrition? Like for example, like that was like an impact, right?
People have trouble or access into like getting like basic necessities to live, which can cause starvation.
Let's talk about your Boone evidence. It says that like education is violent to Native Americans. So what is the benefit of actually going to these systems?
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Your Boone evidence, the last piece of evidence that you read, says that the education system has served as a weapon. If it is a weapon and it's violent, why is it beneficial for Native Americans to go to college?
So the context of that is specifically we're applying it in the case to standardized tests because we're saying, like earlier in the contention, that standardized tests often overlook like either Native cultures or they often discriminate against them. So we're saying without standardized tests, then they can go to college and get a better education.
Okay, cool. It'll be NCAC. And this is the first negative speech. Okay, Mary, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, okay, cool. I negate the resolution. In the United States, colleges and universities ought not consider standardized tests in the undergraduate admissions decisions. My value criterion is utilitarianism, which is to maximize expected well-being for the most amount of people. Prefer my framework. First, moral choices chooses the net most good. And second is the real world. Governments predict success of policies by caring for all of their constituents. The first contention is debt. College attendance is on the decline now. Berman in 2019 says Headlines believes that students are competing for limited spots, but many are in search. Students enrolled dropped 1.7% from the last year. And stimulating higher education causes market oversaturation. Nolan in 2013 says pushing greater numbers of Americans into college as cure-all is similar to pushing Americans into home ownership. The housing bubble already burst. The higher education bubble inevitably will as well. Now, most students will have to take on these debts. Parker in 2019 says, for most, student loans are the way to pay the expenses of a higher education. College tuition inflation has ranged from about 6 to 9% annually. This will be the worst crisis in US history. Rogers and Baum in 2017 says an imminent economic crisis never experienced is coming. The higher education bubble will burst with the force of all previous catastrophes combined, so sudden and so large that it gathers the full force of the loan, insurance, tech, and mortgage crashes, creating a blockbuster level storm. Onto their affirmative case. First, onto their framework, there are two responses. First, that economic burdens increases vulnerabilities and pressures, so all of our reasons the affirmative is bad operates under their framework. Second is that governments have a wider scope of analysis and must include all populations, so our framework is broader and more applicable and doesn't like take out indigenous populations. On their least evidence, first is that they say natives are least likely to go to college, but that will only get worse if there are increased costs for admissions. Tests are the cheapest protocols. Chen in 2016 says testing is objective, low cost, simple, data-driven, which can be automated. The alternative is to hire legions of expensive officers to decipher resumes and concoct extracurricular into socioeconomic contexts. Such increased costs are passed on to students, which makes their impacts worse. Campos in 2015 says the explosion in administrative personnel is the claim that tuition has risen because public funding for higher education has been cut. This flies directly in the face of facts. Onto their NINFA evidence, first is that if indigenous people are in poverty, then forcing them to take on loans worsens those conditions that they criticize. Second is that not evaluating standardized tests causes a switch to grades, which disadvantages students of color. The College Board in 2017 says grade inflation rates have increased the most for students with the lowest percentage of Black or Hispanic students. Colleges which de-emphasize exams enrolled fewer minority students. Onto their rush evidence, first is that it presupposes that with whatever new process is implemented, natives get in. Second is that empowerment isn't worth endless loans and less chances of getting in, especially because their Boone evidence says that education is bad for Native Americans. Ready for cross-ex.
Okay, Emily, are you ready?
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so why would using why hasn't the student loan bubble already blown up?
Sure. So our Berman evidence says that the amount of students that are like currently in college is like not only low but also declining. So the first thing it says is that like competition is like low because colleges are looking for more students, and the second piece is that our empirical evidence that says that it's dropped 1.7%.
Okay, what were some of the justifications for the util framework?
Sure. So our first one was that moral choices only result from choosing the net most good, and that applies to all citizens because it's a question of what like governments ought to do, such as the United States. And the second one was that governments can only predict success by caring for everyone. So we would say like it is idealistic to only care about one particular group, whereas our framework would like include yours as well, and that's why it's better.
Okay, why would using newer methods of evaluating how students get into college lead to increased tuition? Like, can you just explain the link there?
Sure. So we just increase tuition. We're saying that like grade inflations have like already occurred. Like that's like how the market is working right now. And the reason as to why it causes like economic difficulties is because of the debt that students have to pay off. So that's like loans.
Okay. Going on to, let's see. Can you explain the 2 points under Rush, please?
Sure, yeah. So the first one is that like it presupposes that natives are like already getting in, whereas we would say that like because that there's like an inflation of like prices that you would have to pay for extracurriculars, it prevents them from ever getting in or like lowers that cost or that chance significantly. And the second answer is that like you talk about empowerment, but if that causes like endless loans that like recreate cycles of like violence to natives, then that's the reason why like it's net worse.
Okay, that's time. I'm gonna take a minute to prep. Okay, Emily, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The order will be your case and then my case.
Okay.
So first on their debt argument, Robert Farrington in Forbes in 2018 writes that unlike other debt crises, there's no mechanism for the student loan bubble to burst. The collateral that backs student loan debt is the borrower's future earnings. In other debt bubbles, the mechanisms behind the debt allow a popping to happen, a relatively quick unwinding of the debt and economic factors underlying it. The quick unwinding cannot happen with student loan debt. Given that student loans are a collateral on earnings, as long as there is earning potential, the ability to have loans quickly pop via any financial mechanism is rare. But 2, even if I can see that loans are bad, a college education is a net positive investment, and loans, Cheney and Bronson in 2019 explains that an investment pays off over time. Loan crisis obscures the reality that getting a college degree is the best investment that anyone can make. According to a national poll conducted, 61% of adults said that in their current financial situation, taking on student loans was worth attending college, and even among millennials, 56% said that the loans were worth it. But now it's going to increase tuition. It doesn't matter if the tests are cheaper if students can't even get access in the equal access in the first place. Additionally, Penn State in 2019 gives an example of a cheaper alternative. They say grades portray a progress of learning and the formation of skills, and evaluation reports can be easily published. But now into their argument that says that grades don't increase minority attendance, we tell you that a newer and more credible study released by the College Board in 2018 explains. Data from 28 colleges and over 900,000 applicants were compared, and it was found that institutions that went test optional saw gains in the number of Black, Latino, and minority students being admitted. Believe standardizing tests fail to measure the potential of minority and low-income students. Now, let's go on to their framework. We say that structural violence is often also used by the government to target policies that, for example, can cut down on poverty. So yes, structural violence is used in the real world, but additionally, we also tell you that specifically we're looking at the populations that have been overlooked because they're usually not representative, so we can use it in the debate stage today. But now, we tell you that we tell you on the Rush card that we are not saying that colleges are unfair. We are saying that the standardized tests are unfair. But additionally, we also tell you that the Boston 19 card and the 2 cards we read in our case tell you that when Native Americans go into college, they can invest in their money and the investment is actually worth it. So all of the economic disparity evidence that they read to you is counteracted by the Bronston 19 card and the Newton 19 card that says over time they can pay it off and we can have a more equal society.
Okay, cool. I'll also take that. Okay, it'll be my case, your case, and Mary, you good? Okay. Okay. extend our framework of maximizing the most good for the most amount of people. The issue here is going to be the first response we made on the affirmative case, which was that our framework is more encompassing than theirs, i.e., we also talk about marginalized populations, but we also extend that to not just indigenous groups, but rather all citizens within the United States, which is net better because that's the purpose of the government, i.e., even if they care about marginalized groups, they care also about more amount of people, which is why you should default back to our framework. They say that it's overlooked, but we'd say that our most amount of good would account for marginalized populations as well. So our framework does not overlook theirs. I'm going to go for the first contention, and it's very simple. It says that the affirmative believes that higher education is desirable, but that forms a debt bubble, which is catastrophic. Our first piece of evidence says that the number of people enrolled in colleges is on the decline right now, which keeps the economy steady and will be a better world than the affirmative. They think that education is a new magic solution, some sort of panacea for Native struggles. But there are a couple of issues with this. First is that you should ask yourself what that does for Native Americans, especially because their second response talks about why investment pays off and why it's worth going to college. But the 1AR has not explained to you what some sort of benefit that this really is, especially because their Boone evidence definitely says that education systems are bad. It does not say that tests are bad. Second is that it causes an oversaturation of the market, which will inevitably collapse. This is the bubble or popping distinction that they've made. But the nature of economics, such as the internet.com bubble, is that as technological investments were soaring, stocks bid up very high. But after that peak, the bubble will burst and stock values will crash to a drastic price. Their response just says that popping occurs, but they haven't given you a warrant as to why that's the case. B point is that a quick pop will still cause these issues and drastic defaults within the stock markets as well. And B point is that education investments are intertwined to other industries as well, as our last card explains, which just shows why a pop in education will cause other issues as well. We see these same patterns in education because as people are pressured into going to college, they look to student loans to bear this economic burden. They have not answered the burden card about why this causes loans, which just shows how it's worse because tuitions are also inflating right now. That means that the AFT solution will cause the worst collapse in history because the education bubble comprises of 1/6 of America's entire economy that's intertwined into other industries, which just shows why it's net worse and causes a lot of harms under our framing mechanisms. Now on to case, I'm going to go for the Chen evidence because the one response they've made is that grades are cheaper or that grades can be used. But their counter evidence that they read onto our College Board evidence just talks about why tests is optional, doesn't say that grades are transparent, which is going to be the distinguishing marker here because we read evidence that says that there's a disparity between Black and Latino students in terms of grades that are intertwined, which is why using testing that is standardized is not only cheap, but also an objective number that is better than the affirmative because they have no other alternative other than grades, but they've conceded that causes harms to marginalized communities and excludes them from college, which is also bad under their framing mechanisms. Thank you.
All right, everyone ready?
Yeah, good.
This is going to be what you just said in case, and then I'll just move on to extensions.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Okay. So on to the framework debate. They say that their framework is more encompassing, but we specifically tell you, one, structural violence is also used in the real world, and two, we are trying to look at the overlooked populations. If we use util, that's the exact point. Using utilitarianism has only resulted into these oppressive populations systematically over time being overlooked every single instance, which is why we have to make a change and look towards structural violence. Using util only makes the problem worse. Thus, you prefer my framework of minimizing oppression, so you should vote for the side which reduces suffering among society's most vulnerable populations. Now onto the debt bubble argument. They tell you that the debt bubble is going to pop, and they say that we have no warrants to our arguments. But the Farrington card in 2018 is very clear in saying that a quick unwinding cannot happen with student loan debt. Given that student loans are collateral on earnings, as long as there is an earning potential, the ability to have loans quickly pop via any financial mechanism is rare. Thus, that cuts off their biggest impact in the round of student loan bubble debt popping. But even then, they tell you that education systems are bad. We are saying in our case that education systems are intrinsically bad because of things like standardized tests that overlook native cultures. Getting rid of standardized tests is going to be the solution to this issue. But also, they say testing is cheaper, but we additionally tell you that Penn State in 2019 specifically tells you that grades are a better and alternative solution because grades are something that already exists and won't have an extra cost. But even then, we tell you that universities that went test optional actually saw a larger proportion of minority students attending. This card is crucial in the round because it proves that the affirmative actually solves for the issues here, and not just in Indigenous peoples, but also under their own framework of structural violence, because the card also talks about Blacks and Latinos. We're winning under both frameworks here. But even then, let's go on to the most important arguments that say that Native Americans actually struggle less because of the Cheney-Bronston 2019 card and the Newton-Forbes in 2019 card, that both say that an investment is the best thing you can do, because going even among millennials, they have said themselves that 56% of the loans were worth it and that the investment pays off over time, meaning the affirmative narrative goes like this, and this is how you're going to be voting in the round. We went under both frameworks because structural violence is used in the real world, and we're looking at overlooked populations. But even then, we reach you a card by the College Board that specifically states that getting rid of standardized tests also helps other minorities. We also tell you that investments are better for over time, and student loans aren't going to be as crippling as right now, where Indigenous people are constantly being overlooked. Thus, you vote affirmative.
Okay, good round. And I hope you guys enjoyed what Lincoln Douglas is. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see? Legend has it that long ago, many Americans believed that giants built from stone once roamed the earth. One such giant was called Hobomok. Like all giants, Hobomok shook the earth as he walked and spoke loud as thunder. Legend has it that one day, a spell was cast, and years passed while Hobomok slept.
Wake up, Nicole! It's election day! Come on, get up, let's go vote, and then we get to eat pizza.
Krista, there's no point. Go away. Maybe we're just waiting for the locusts to come. Maybe we're waiting for the whole world to set fire, for God to finally cleanse his melting pot, and for a pure human race to rise from the ashes, because obviously the stakes aren't high enough yet. 2016 was supposed to be the year that America's sleeping giant would finally awaken. Some predicted a massive "we have arrived" surge in voter registration, a Latino wave.
No. Point? No point?
Look, there are millions of people voting today, right? There's just one of me. It's like adding a drop of water to the ocean. Is that drop of water gonna change the shape of the ocean? I mean, Krista, really, it's just one vote. The Pew Research Center predicts that by this year's presidential election, 32 million Hispanics will be eligible to vote, making us, for the first time in history, the largest voting minority group in America. However, because Hispanics remain least likely to show up to the polls, we have for years been referred to as the sleeping giant, that, if awakened, would have a profound impact on America's political landscape. But to this day, we are seen as a monolithic voting bloc, believed to be single-issue voters on immigration, pandered to with a display of mediocre Spanish skills, and systemically disenfranchised through voter ID laws and gerrymandering. So maybe the motivation to wake up and vote must come from within our own communities. The poetry, The Star-Spangled Banner by Angelica Aguilera, A Voter's Problem by Crystal Valentine, the prose, Introduction to Mi Gente by Marisa Franco, Why as a Latina Millennial I'm Urging More Latinos to Vote by Cristina Pinzon, The Legend of Hobomok, The Sleeping Giant by Jason Marchi, Don't Let the Illegals Vote by Robert Courtney Smith, the drama, Vote by Eric Coble, and articles from The Guardian, Slate Magazine, and The Washington Post, and the song, The Star-Spangled Banner by Francis Scott Key. When my parents fled communist Cuba, they did so knowing that my family and I would have liberty and a chance for a better life in America. But that dream only works when we're awake. Would you support that, Congressman O'Rourke? Sí. Necesitamos incluir cada persona en el éxito de esta economía. Cada votante necesitamos escuchar. Thank you. Gracias. Memo to presidential candidates. The time for Hola Amigo campaigns is over. If you want the Latino vote in 2020, make us a priority. Wake up. Where am I? Hi there. Who are you? Well, I'm Senator J.K. Fodderman. The year is 1917, and you appear to be concussed. Wait here, and I'll walk you home after I've cast my ballot. Okay. I'm dreaming. Wait, you were going to vote. Was I going with you? Not likely, darling. Not unless you were going to deliver freshly baked muffins to the poll workers. Oh, okay, so you're like one of those guys with 50 acres who can vote, right? 500 acres and 10 slaves. Thank you very much. I wouldn't have been elected to the Senate if I hadn't met the requirements. Well, what about everybody else? Why shouldn't they vote? She is a young Latina. Her name is Magda Votante. When she tried to vote, poll workers said they couldn't find her in the registry, asking if this was her correct polling location. Sí, señora. I'm voting here. The poll worker asked Magda for her ID. But maybe I know my rights. And I know it's hard. I know you think you're just another flame in an uncontrollable inferno. And what does a flame know about voting anyway? What's a vote to a burning democracy? The poll worker referred Magda to another poll worker to find her name in the registry. I don't think you're in here. Are you sure you're in the right district? Magda wondered whether the ladies had been required to ask Latinos for ID, whether it was a practice among poll workers. Sí, señora. I'm voting here. Wake up. Who are you? Elizabeth Cady Stanton, of course. Well, don't you stand there. Take these. We've got a lot of work to do, ladies. You can read and write, can't you? Wait, you're gonna stand up and ask for the same rights as men, aren't you? Well, not ask, demand. I'm done with that. Legend has it, to show his anger, Hobbamok stomped his foot and caused the river to change direction because we need leaders. And we need Latinx leaders who are not just pro-Latino, but pro-poor, pro-black, pro-women, pro-climate, pro-indigenous, because our community is all of those things. And the rocket's red glare, we watched our homes bursting in air. It gave proof to the night that Latinos want the same thing as any other American. That said, when we don't bother to fight, when we don't bother to walk to the polling booths, we send a message that no one has to listen to us. We can't afford to do this anymore. This year, we will have another opportunity to vote, and the stakes have never been higher. In the past 2 years, Latino millennials have been under attack, faced with the constant threat of deportation while thousands of families have been torn apart. Those who have the right to vote can stand up. Can wake up.
Nicole, yes or no? Polls close in an hour.
Krista, you're right. I gotta add my drop of water to the ocean. O'er the land of the free. Legend has it that Hobomok still sleeps, but when he wakes up, he will be very, very angry. And the home of the brave.
In my school's Emmy-nominated production of The Little Mermaid, I was cast as my favorite character, Ursula, spitting image. I honestly think they were going for physical resemblance and authentic performance. Good, right? And like the Wicked Witch of the Water, I'm so misunderstood. Everyone only sees my outward tentacles instead of the wholesome Jew on the inside. But Ursula had so many admirable qualities. She recognized the importance of contract law, womanhood, vocal rest. I just wanted to emulate the sea sorceress, so I partook in some intense method acting. I went on an 8-day grape juice cleanse just to get the right shade. Got slim thick and bullied a Bambi-eyed ginger. But after the final curtain, when I thought everything would be back to normal, for some reason the cast couldn't see past the purple. They still saw me as a villain. But sadly, the vilification of presumed enemies is not unique to high school musicals. In a society that values personalities over policy and craves hatred over human rights, our infatuation with vilifying is not at all surprising. Psychologist Stephen Taylor explains that society is plagued by a good versus evil mentality. People are either heroes, or if not, villains. And when this process is amplified by the very things we created to connect us, we give birth to an ever-expanding network of villains. Whether it's reducing all people on government welfare, to lazy, characterizing all cops as racist, or marginalizing a religious group whose beliefs and practices we don't understand. In these divided times, it has become far too easy to otherize, dehumanize, and vilify those we see as different, ultimately recasting their characters as evil to play the villains in our stories. So today, let's first figure out why we create villains. Then, we'll take a look at what vilifying creates. And finally, discover how to become a hero. And fast, before climate change puts us all under the sea. I'm not sure if you're up to date on your mermaid history, but mermaids and humans have been rivals for centuries, ever since Moses parted the sea. The mer people were not happy. It took an extreme act of teen angst for both groups to realize they're really not that different. From the waist up. A study conducted by the nonpartisan group More in Common highlights how Americans fall victim to the harsh divide between suspicions and reality, otherwise known as a perception gap. The survey asked participants to rate how they think people in the opposing political party feel on major issues. On gun reform, Democrats were off by a long shot. They estimated that only 40% of Republicans are in favor, when in reality, 75% of Republicans think more should be done to curb gun violence. Conversely, Republican participants suspected that over 50% of Democrats think all police are bad, when actually, it's only 15%. The reality is, most Americans are flexible in their beliefs and eager to compromise. But rather than rallying around what we share in common, we diverge to the extremes, and thus, villains are born. And once extremes are established, they're amplified by the technologies originally designed to connect us. Instead of enacting policies to diminish hateful content on their platforms, media companies create algorithms that amplify hate to optimize engagement. YouTube, for example, in 2017 introduced a new algorithm called Reinforce, designed to keep viewers glued to their screens. We all know how it works. When you finish a video, 26 more are recommended to you. This is how 15-year-old David Shearett went from watching Call of Duty clips on YouTube to war on feminism videos to Holocaust denial. But Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook all have their own mechanisms that pave the way for conspiracy theories, fake news, and vitriol to go viral. So, of course, what happens when the only media you consume is tainted with hate? Your world becomes a vacuum of vilification. Unpopular opinion, Ariel was a stalker. She literally watched Prince Eric from behind a rock. So when Daddy found out, King Triton went a little off the deep end. And that's because vilification leads to radicalization. A recent Reveal News investigation uncovered over 400 U.S. law enforcement officers as members of private Facebook groups supporting racist, Islamophobic, and anti-government ideologies. Many of these groups bearing titles like White Lives Matter or Death to Islam Undercover. Just last July, a Louisiana cop was fired for posting threats to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Facebook, stating that she needs a round. And I don't mean the kind she used to serve. Peterson, associate professor of sociology at Chapman University, who has studied extremist groups for over 20 years, explains that views like those expressed in these groups inevitably influence an individual's decision-making process. And while only a small portion of those who protect and serve belong to these radical groups, a lot of damage is done in the process, because radicalization becomes fatal when it's realized with acts of violence. 5 months ago, in just the 8 days of Hanukkah, 9 attacks were issued on the Jewish people of the New York area, including beatings, the shooting at a kosher store in Jersey City, and Grafton Thomas, bursting through the door of a rabbi's house, machete in hand, killing 5 people. Some of my happiest memories are playing outside my synagogue every Saturday. But today, the kids are under constant surveillance by armed guards. No longer is it safe to pray in peace, carry out a routine fire drill at school, or go back to school shopping at Walmart, because division reigns supreme, and the hunt to exterminate the enemy is on. When Thomas attacked on Hanukkah, when threats to congressional women of color were issued, and every mass shooting and every hate crime, these perpetrators don't see people. They see the enemy. And it's horrifying to think that I am someone else's villain. So, as the Queen of the Sea would say, how can we save these poor unfortunate souls? Well, like Ariel, we literally have to humanize. In her book, The Opposite of Hate, author Sally Cohen argues that the opposite of hate isn't love, it's connection. And we can connect using what she calls the ABCs of connection speech. The first step is to affirm. Don't deny the way someone feels. Try to understand why they feel that way. Let's say your aunt, Linda, is convinced the Mexicans are stealing our jobs. You listen to Linda when she tells you that many of her family members have recently been fired. The Mexican immigrants are just her villain. Next, bridge. But avoid using the word but. This discredits everything Aunt Linda just said. In building a bridge, try using words like actually or the good news is. Anything but. Something like, actually, Aunt Linda, over 50% of the workforce is made up of white middle-class Americans. And that leads into the final step. Connect. Present your point of view. Share a couple of facts they may not have known. We can connect with our everyday villains and turn them into real humans. By only seeing each other as opponents to be beaten, villains to be defeated, we'll never heal the divide. Democrats and Republicans aren't adversaries. Lack of healthcare is the villain. The rich and poor aren't rivals. Income inequality is the villain. Americans and immigrants aren't enemies. They can be the same. So, the next time you watch The Little Mermaid, take a deeper look at its villain. Try and appreciate Ursula. Cherish her character arc. Honor her passion. Relish in her tentacles. And never underestimate the power of body language.